We always ask the founders who sit here, we always ask about the DC startup ecosystem. So
Sure.
why did you stay here in DC versus New York or Silicon Valley? Like, did you make a conscientious effort to stay here in DC? I mean, what was the benefits for staying here?
So my sample size is not a good one for your question. For me, it was basically a personal choice. I have an awesome family. I have a bunch of children that got really happy here, living in Maryland, and the situation here was really, really good for them personally. And I felt as though the startup community here was coming up the curve, and so the match of those two things. I probably, if the family situation wasn't that great, I would have gone to the question of, do we go? And if the startup situation was really bad, I might have pushed back a little bit on the family side. But so I think one's fantastic, and I think one's emerging. And the startup scene here is emerging. I'd say we have a few challenges. A lot of people bitch and moan about capital being a challenge. It's actually not a problem. It's our own mental breakdown a little bit. Some of it has to do with this networking piece, which is getting much more familiar with really getting ideas communicated well and sharing early and building out the network that's here. But I also think we have a couple of other challenges. I don't think we think big enough. I think that if there's an affliction here in DC, it's that we don't think in massive game-changing stuff. Some of that is that we tell ourselves that we should start small. It's okay to start small as long as you're on a journey to something big. But start with the big idea and then back into what it is that you want to test, as opposed to starting with a small idea and hoping that somehow magically it's going to get bigger. It's really hard to do it in that order. So I would challenge all of you as founders, especially if you're early, how can you make this idea a much bigger kind of game-changing idea? Because you only have so many, I call them 5-year cycles. You get a limited number of them. So if you spend a bunch of time working on a small problem, you could have been spending that time working on a big problem. My view is better to fail at a big problem, because you'll learn a lot more in that process, especially in that early 1 or 2 cycles, than to succeed in a small way but not make all the mistakes and deal with the problems of dealing with a much bigger problem. If your scope of your whole thing is small. Doesn't mean that you can't start with the ambition of something big and then decide what's the first stepping stone on that path. But I hear a lot of ideas in DC that are either duplicative or they're just not big enough. And we just need to think bigger. Now, it's not unique to DC. I've traveled around the country. I spend a lot of time in a lot of markets. I just think we ought to be, if I had one wish for our community to each other, it would be to challenge each other when we hear an idea to be a little bit harder on ourselves to be bigger. Right, to look at things and go after something a little bit meatier, a little bit more challenging. I think we get stuck in kind of mediocrity or just sort of marginally okay kind of stuff.